Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to the 5th episode of Life, Love, and Lipidemia. This is our regular Sunday afternoon chat. If you can hear me on Facebook, just type in the comment and say hi, so I know that everything's good. Okay, once again, welcome. Thank you for joining us this Sunday. Finally, we've got the tech sorted out. Do you notice any difference between my image today and last week's image? Finally got a haircut. Feels like a big burden lifted off my head. Anyway, thank you for joining us. This is Life, Love, and Lipidemia. It is a show that, or an interview series that I started because I wanted to support my students who were going to become professionals in the future, pharmacy professionals, and they would have to counsel their patients, they would have to counsel their loved ones, and to give advice. So I've always felt that being in healthcare or being in education or being in the coaching line, there are always two particular roles that we have to fulfill. So the first part is your technical expertise, and that will be pharmacy, that will be medicine, that will be psychology, whatever your field of expertise is. But the other part of success is actually the internal part of it, which is yourself. So how do you handle yourself? How do you communicate with people? How do you handle your own motivation? How do you keep yourself going every day? And these are some of the issues that we talk about on this show. So typically, I would invite a healthcare professional to come on and share his experience or her experience in how he or she deals with these situations. Today is the first time that I'm inviting a guest who is not from the healthcare industry, not from our industry. And I think that that's really important because throughout my career, one of the things that I've realized is the best way to learn sometimes is to speak to people from other industries and learn from how they actually manage situations there. When you implement it in your own industry, you realize that, hey, these things are actually very, very transferable. So today is our first interview where we have someone from the education industry. Hey, it's none other than my good friend, Mr. Flex Tio. Oh.
Hi.
Okay, welcome, Flex.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Sean. Yeah. And I hope you brought your cup of coffee as well, since it's a coffee talk.
Yeah, it's right here. So I've known Flex from Toastmasters. We used to go around and deliver speeches and practice the way we express our ideas. But some of you might not know this. So Flex is actually the guy who got me back into running. You know, I firstly, there are two things I don't like. I don't like waking up early on a Sunday morning, and I don't like going for a run. And Flex somehow managed to drag me out of the bed at 7 o'clock on Sunday and force me to run along with him at the Chinese Garden and the Jurong Lake Garden area. And I always remember the times when I'm so tired and you're like, keep going, keep going, keep going. And that's how we eventually completed the entire journey. So during our runs, we actually have conversations, and especially when we are cooling down, I started to understand him a little bit more. And one of the things that strikes me the most is his commitment to his students, his willingness to engage them, to think of different ways to manage them. And for someone who's in education, he definitely handles difficult situations, and there are times where he has to put himself in the shoes of his students. Now, that's not necessarily easy to do. Right? So Today, we're going to find out how he does it and how we in healthcare can interpret those lessons and apply it to ourselves, our patients, and our loved ones. All right, so may I please introduce Flex? All right, Flex, why not we start off by sharing with everyone here. Tell us a bit about yourself and your work.
Right, sure thing. A fantastic afternoon to everyone on Facebook. First of all, I want to thank Sean for the opportunity to go live together with you on your show. Right, a little bit about me. My name is Flex Tio, and I'm a specialist in teaching and learning and senior lecturer with Nanyang Polytechnic for about 8 years. So I've taught in Nanyang Poly for 8 years, largely to do with programming and computer stuff. But as a Polytechnic lecturer, that's actually not the only thing we do. We would also guide students, such as through their CCA and all that. And I have the opportunity to be in charge of a diploma club. And through those stints, I work together with students and train out their leadership skills. So it was a little club that even myself, we together, students and I, we explore leadership together. Yeah, offline, I usually like to call myself an engineer by training, educator by profession, and a rebel at heart. So I think the rebel at heart is important for us to bring out authenticity.
How does the rebel at heart help to bring out authenticity?
Well, I think a lot of times we are all like, Singapore is a difficult society. There's lots of rules, but at the same time, I also believe that yes, we follow the rules. Of course, we don't break the laws, but at the same time, for things like creativity and innovation to happen, and being true to yourself, the rebel at heart actually comes in. So how I define a rebel, it's not like those riots that you see out there in the world, but really rebel as in a contributing member to the society, understand how the society works, and really find a way around it to make sure that things are working out and all that. I
And that's
think that
being
would be
very resourceful. Okay, one question I like to ask educators.
Yes.
Why join education? Because I have many friends who are teachers. And sometimes when I speak to them, the first thing they tell me is, don't be a teacher. So what makes you want to come into education?
Well, for this, maybe I'll just go a little bit into the history. Before I was an educator in Nanyang Polytechnic, I'm actually an IT research engineer with Ministry of Defense. So Ministry of Defense, being Ministry of Defense, there will be a lot of things that we do which, well, we can't share openly outside. So after a while, it's like getting bored. It's like, I can't share my stuff outside, but I think I'm a person who like to share. So I was trying to find my way around, like what could be this next thing that I want to go for. And after searching, it's like, okay, why not try education? Because education is all about sharing. So got myself signed up through Toastmaster to see if I like to share. And then after that, I even went to Japan to try out teaching little kids English before I actually landed myself in this current work with Nanyang Polytechnic.
Wow. So what, as an educator, what do you find is one of the most challenging things?
Well, as an educator, this may come as a surprise for some of you. It's actually not the teaching. It is actually working with people that is the hardest to do. I mean, teaching, all of us are professional, like Sean would be a healthcare professional. So you definitely have your own healthcare expertise to rely on. But when we enter the class and we start teaching other people, we are not robots regurgitating knowledge. We are actually dealing with people. And the students that come to our class, they don't just come to the class to learn. Apparently, they also come together with their baggage. Maybe they have some problems at home, and they are all going to bring this into class. And it's all about managing those stuff that is tough. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's pretty common to some of the experiences that I have in the healthcare industry. I mean, I used to have students from the universities who would come under my pharmacy for internship. I used to have students from the polys who would come over for their industrial attachment. And I've always told them, you're worried that the internet is down, you're worried that the medication label machine is spoiled. Wait until one of your staff comes and tell you, hey, I don't want to work with her anymore. You try to go and handle that human relations issue. So human relations are definitely one of the biggest challenges in our role as coaches, as educators. So
definitely. And I think throughout the workforce, in fact, this is the first time we ever got 4 generations of people working together. I'm not sure if you realize. Human life has never been that long before, and it's the first time we have like baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z all together in the same office, and that's even tougher dynamics for us to work with each other.
So when you have to deal with difficult situations, difficult challenges, sometimes students who come with really challenging issues, what's the general approach that you take?
What's the general approach that I take for challenging students? I guess one of the common sort of students which I face are students who don't come to class that often. I mean, as lecturers, we know that if students don't come for class, they are going to miss a part of the knowledge, and that's going to be very tough. I think in the beginning of my lecturing career, I was thinking, hey, why did the student not come to class? Did they not like my class, or are they just plain lazy? But it was after a few rounds, I found out that actually that is not the first thing to go to. In fact, most of the time, it helps to think that students genuinely want to come to class, and it is the other baggages that they have with them, like it could be some issue at home, and some of our students don't come from privileged background, so they might be studying and they are working at the same time. So it's about understanding them, probably using empathy to not just understand their situation, but empathize with them, understanding their feelings, to see how they feel and what actually stops them from coming to school and all that. And these are all important part of the work.
And that really, I guess it links us to the issues, the topic that we wanted to speak about today, which is empathy, because empathy is really important for all of our work. I mean, not just in healthcare, not just in education, but sometimes in just basic human to human relations. It's important for us to be able to practice empathy, but yet it sounds so cliche. We are always taught that we have to be empathetic, but when you actually tell somebody you have to be empathetic, the person sometimes goes away saying, what do I actually have to do to be empathetic? I was not born empathetic. So this is the topic that we really want to explore today. So the first thing that I really want to ask you is this. I mean, how would you define empathy?
Well, Sean, that's a very big question. Trying to define empathy. I guess for me, empathy is about connection. It's about engaging another person, the feelings. And when we empathize with one another, I guess it's the feeling of, I hear you, I understand you, I can see where you're coming from. And I guess it's through those language that you sort of define empathy as a concept.
Okay. Do you think empathy comes naturally?
Empathy, does it come naturally? Well, as it turns out, everyone will definitely have some empathy. It's just whether we are able to harness it and show it at a point in time. And because of that, maybe to talk about whether it comes naturally or not, I think maybe it's better to say that empathy is more like a practice and a skill that needs to be learned. So to some, maybe it's not that natural to show empathy, even though it's somewhere within them. So we got to sharpen the skill and try to bring this connection with other people out.
Okay. If if empathy is a skill, are you saying that empathy can be learned? Because as we know in the education industry, there are skills, and if it's a skill, it can be learned, it can be practiced, which means someone who is not naturally empathetic can actually pick it up.
I definitely believe that empathy is something that can be learned. It is a practice. Uh, I guess for those who know me long enough, they will know that I'm not the empathetic sort of person when they meet me in school. So I used to be, step on people's tails, not knowing what's going on, very lost, very aloof, and don't understand what is going on. Then after that, you sort of think about it, like when you don't understand people, it sort of give you a lot of anguish. Like you don't know how the world is exactly working, and it's like, I thought I'm talking logic to you, but why do you not understand? And it's from there, I think I have a epiphany somewhere in between as I try to learn more about human relationship and technical relationship. And I come to a few things, and one of these things is called empathy, the ability to understand the other person's feeling and all that. And it helped me open up my eyes as to the there are, the variety of people there are in this world.
Okay, and
So
that's actually quite interesting, because for all of us who's listening here, and for all of us who are in healthcare, we face difficult patients. All right, some of you might call them FON, and don't look at me as if you don't understand what FON is. For those of you who are not in the healthcare industry, and if you're not sure what FON is, let's just keep it that way, right? But sometimes we have difficult patients, difficult people who come to us. Sometimes it's not really their fault. We have no idea what's happening. They just come straight up to us. They say nasty things to us. They and it strikes emotionally, and it feels like a personal attack sometimes. All right, so with that idea, I mean, how can that person be empathetic? Or if I put it in another way, if you were to provide advice or to suggestions to this person, how would you teach this person to be empathetic?
You know what's great about empathy is that there's actually a so-called theory or framework that about empathy. And in fact, this theory or framework comes from the healthcare industry. I believe it was Teresa Wiseman, a nursing scholar, which actually came out with these 4 attributes for empathy. And I thought that these 4 attributes of empathy can actually help us make empathy something that's actionable and practicable, something that we can actually learn as a skill, as a habit. So in her study, the 4 attributes, first of all, is perspective taking. And when we talk about perspective taking, we mean, the cliche will be stepping in someone else's shoe. But what do we mean by stepping in someone else's shoe? It's about understanding the situation from that person's point of view. So if you were that person with his personality, make your best effort. What do you think that person is feeling at the moment when he's facing that situation? So that'd be perspective taking. The second part is non-judgment. So when we try to understand the situation, we are probably not that quick to want to formulate an answer and reply. So we are dealing with human emotions here, not solving problems. So non-judgment, just put judgment aside and sink in deep into the feeling and emotions of the other person and really try to understand.
So it means we have to sink in and feel what the other person is feeling?
Yeah, in a way. So we try to feel with the person in that sense. And which comes to the final 2 attribute, which I thought was very interesting, and that sort of changes me because I didn't think about understanding another person's feeling in that sort of depth. The third and fourth attribute are, the third one is understand the feeling. And when we talk about understand the feeling, very simple way would be to reach into our own experience. It need not be the very same experience that we experience with that person, but something similar. Like for instance, you feel that that person is going to be lonely. So from your own experience, what does loneliness feel like? What does anger feel like? What does being depressed, being sad actually feel like? And the fourth part is the connection making part, which is after you draw from your experience and really understand this feeling that the person is going through, we tell the person about our understanding. And that's where the connection actually comes in.
So it seems like a key part of this is, well, not just feeling what the other person feels, but it's the action of reflecting that experience back to at least tell the person that, oh, I understand what you are
Yeah.
going through. Is that it?
Yeah, definitely. And that actually forms a connection. I'm not sure whether you have any, and those of you over at Facebook, whether you all have such experiences before. So you were sad, you were depressed, you go to a friend, you share it with your friend. And your friend will go something like, me too. So the moment they say me too and acknowledge the emotion, and you know that you are actually not alone feeling this sort of emotion, someone has felt it with you. Uh, the sadness and the anguish that in you sort of dissipates, and that is the feeling of someone empathizing with you. And that's how sadness can actually, we always say what, share the burden, and the burden gets shared this way by knowing that we are not alone. So I guess this is what empathy is trying to achieve.
Mm. Okay, so Flex, if let's say, all right, a student, patient, or someone comes up to me,
Mm-hmm.
okay, if the person is sharing a deep issue with me or is being challenging, different situations, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what should I do? What's the first thing that I need to do to handle the situation better?
The first thing that I would do is to understand more about what's going on behind their mind.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, the empathy comes in because non-judgment. So you want to understand why did that person feel that way. So maybe for a start, I'll just want to draw an experience I had with a student. So this particular student is a performing student, very bubbly, very happy, loves friends, loves story. And we were actually proposing for her to change class so that she can get a leadership opportunity, which is going to do her very well in the time to come and in her future. But there is one issue. So if she is to change class, this means that she will be with a bunch of people who she did not know, and she sort of have to make friends all over again. So at first we didn't understand what's actually holding her back, because I thought this is what she actually wanted. She wanted leadership opportunity. She wanted to uh, groom herself a bit more and really to develop her own character. It's like, but when she talked about changing class, her face seems to change. So at that point in time, you know that there's a gap, and uh, just cast judgment aside and start getting curious about what is this emotion and what is this resistance, and we start to explore. So as it turns out, that was the point lah. Afraid that she's alone without friends and all that, and we try to understand from different points of view. What if this happened, and what if that happened? All around taking from her perspective. So this is something initially it was hard for me to understand. Me being an introvert, uh, it's okay to just switch class and change the class. Probably nothing will happen. But for this student, I know that it's different. This is a very big thing for her to not being able to come together with a class. So once I understood this, then it's really about working together for what could be a win-win situation for her. So I think all the while supporting her and assuring her that she need not make the choice to take up the leadership position to change class if she really feels that being in this same class is important. Yeah, I think that sort of sums it up, the difficulty, and it really begins by understanding what's the psyche going on behind the student.
Okay, so it means that we should be asking a number of questions to the people that we are speaking to, trying to understand that situation better. How do we
Yeah.
cope with it within ourselves? How should we go about thinking about this situation, handling the internal turmoil within ourselves? Because sometimes when people come right at you, you might not be ready for it. How should we think?
Yeah. And I was just thinking, because Singapore is such a fast-paced society, usually when you are presented with a problem, what do? Solve a problem? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
In
we are
fact,
all trained to do, right? We are all trained to fix a problem.
yeah. Unfortunately, from my experience, that seems to be a big problem in itself when we try to solve the problem without addressing the emotions of the person. So in the end, in fact, a lot of times if I start solving problem for students, I would end up with more bad behaviors that I need to manage it at the end of the class, and it might be taking up more time. Yeah, so in fact, if the first thing to go to is how do we get out of the problem solving mode and really start addressing the real problems that's behind a person, and that's very contextual and laden with emotion. I mean, human beings are emotional beings, so that can't be helped.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go on.
If you're thinking about the next step, so that's one part. The other part has to. I think one of the things that I struggled when I learned about empathy was really trying to what does it mean by looking through someone else's eyes and all that. And sometimes, especially the old me will be thinking someone committed a mistake, but that's not logical. That's not what I would do. But empathy, trying to make connection, trying to understand the person. So what works for me was this concept called the most generous interpretation of a person. And I thought that sort of sets the tone because you are giving the other person a benefit of a doubt first before you even talk about anything. So the benefit of a doubt actually helps me to just take one step back and understand the person for who he is or she is first.
Oh, so okay, wait. So that's interesting, right? You mentioned this is about the most generous interpretation of a person. So, are you saying that that's something that we should ask ourselves? Like, what's the most generous interpretation of a person?
I think that definitely helps to at least take one step back and see from the other person's point of view. So when I talk about generous interpretation of a person, it will mean like, let's see, at that moment in time, given that that is the person and that is the situation, do you think, is there any possibility at all he or she is behaving in that manner? I think this thought could actually really help you just take a step back. And what I realized is more often than not, I could find reasons for that person to act that way. Yeah, and that to me is a form of generous interpretation. So maybe for those who are at Facebook right now, you could think of a really bad person, a really bad situation where you have to deal with a very sucky person. Maybe if you reflect that on that situation, are you able to think of a reason given that person, the situation he is in, and it could be something that you don't even know. Is there this possibility of him or her acting the way he or she does.
Wow, I think that's something that I would definitely consider, because okay, so here's the situation, right? In a lot of our work, the people who come to seek services from us, right? Be it if you're in retail or be it if you are in healthcare, when they come to you, they don't really care about how your day actually is, but they remember how their day went, and they remember the experiences that they had before they came to you. But when they come to you, and if everything happens to be released, you have to handle it. And by asking
Yeah.
yourself, what's the most generous interpretation of a person? The most generous interpretation of the person. And you might start to think that, hey, maybe he's really having a bad day. Maybe he did not pass the test and he's not feeling good. Maybe his loved one is not well. So there are many reasons why a person could be feeling that way. And after that, you proceed to ask further questions to understand his situation better. But at least it helps you take a step back, right? And one of the things that we most of the time when somebody comes to you with situations like this, it is, and if they say nasty things, it is really not personal. Yeah, they might be angry with the system, they might be angry with the promotion, they might be angry with the law, but it's really not you as a person. And for us as coaches, for us as professionals, if we just ask ourselves, what is the most generous interpretation of a person? That really is the first step to practicing empathy. Is that how you do it, Flex?
Or at least that is what I think works for me very well. It really keeps me behind the scenes and understanding the situation first. With that being said, I was a very skeptical person. When I first heard about this thing called most generous interpretation, I was like, how on earth does it mean that it gives excuses for everyone to commit any sort of mistake? Just want to clarify that actually that's a misconception. Right now, I felt that the generous interpretation opens up the opportunity for empathy, connection, and really understanding what's going through the mind of a person. So at this stage, remember non-judgment. So we are not casting any judgment yet. So as with any judgment, it could mean that the person is correct or wrong. At this point in time, we just don't care. We just want to care about the person and understand where that person is coming from.
So what you're saying is we are not concerned about, at this point, right? We are not concerned about right or wrong, agree or disagree, but really is when somebody presents to you in a certain way, what are some of the possible issues? If he is at his best, what might that be like, right? Or yeah, would that be accurate?
Yeah, I think that sort of sums it. And one interesting thing about empathy is that although maybe at first I pick up empathy for the purpose of trying to interact with people at work and all that, as it turns out, it contributes greatly into my personal life also. Learning, being able to understand my friends, my family a lot better, and I guess we are really building a lot stronger relationship at this moment.
Really, it's all by asking yourself this one key question.
Yeah, and you tend to be more forgiving after that. It's like, oh yeah, I can see why you're reacting this way. Okay, okay, hang on. Okay, you're really feeling it. Yeah, and I sort of feel with you. Okay, let's take a deep breath and see how we can solve your problem now. That I understand you a bit better.
And for everyone on Facebook that's watching, what you just heard is from somebody who claims to not be born empathetic. So he actually learned the skill, he picked it up. And the way that he started practicing it is really by asking himself, what is the most generous interpretation of a person? So for everyone who's listening, I urge you to think about it. And ask yourself, in your life, in your career, when communicating with loved ones, with patients, with coaches, with students, we've all faced difficult situations. If you ask yourself the question, what is the most generous interpretation of the person? Would that change the way you react? And if it does, is the outcome likely to be better or worse? Okay. All right, Flex. Is this something that we can teach our students as well? Because we commonly talk about this as for somebody who is coaching somebody or guiding somebody else. Is this something we can teach our students?
In terms of teaching students, yes, we can teach the framework, no problem. But I think it's more important for coaches to model empathy. Because essentially that from the education perspective, that's how students learn, by modeling. Modeling is one of the most important aspect of learning. So you don't just teach the framework or theory by itself. They actually get to see empathy in action. And what it means for the educators, for the coaches out there is every time you need to respond to a student query, when you are interacting with them, actually there is a sliding moment where we can make the connection, and empathy could be one of these ingredients inside.
Yeah, and sometimes just asking yourself this one question could change the course of the entire conversation, and that would result in your ability to build a stronger relationship with the person you're speaking to. For those of us who deal with situations like this, especially for those of us who are in healthcare, you realize that the relationship is so important to the outcomes that you can produce for your client or for in our line, our patients. Because sometimes patients come to us with very difficult situations, and if they are seeing you for the first time, why should they trust you? There's one of the best ways to build trust is to let the person realize that you're at least trying to see it from his point or her point of view. Because it's arguable to say that you fully understand it. I mean, I've dispensed drugs for very serious conditions, and there was once a patient who come to me and say, "Hey, you understand? You go through it before, man." And I'm like, no. Yeah. Now there are two situations to this, right? So the first situation is that's a very difficult thing to handle because it feels like a personal kind of attack. And secondly, it's do you really fully understand it or not? So if I was thinking if in that situation, I ask myself, what's the most generous interpretation of this person? Then that would allow me to take a step back from the whole situation. And you tend to be able to discern what are the facts and what are the emotions. And that might allow you to handle the situation better. Okay. So I am going to ask Flex to think about any final words he would like to share with us before we conclude this interview. And in the meantime, if you have any questions or any comments on empathy, just feel free to put it in the chat box, and we will reply to it after Flex has shared his final tips. Okay, Flex, final message for all of us.
Our final message. I think the world needs more love. Especially at stage where we are talking about social distancing, where everyone gets a lot more alone. I sincerely believe that, and which is why actually I don't like the term social distancing. I like the term that the government use, safe distancing, a lot better. You may think it's semantic, but I don't think we should distance ourselves socially, but all the more we should be more socially connected with one another, while maintaining physical distance, of course. And I really feel that one of the biggest key to that is really empathy. So if you haven't called your loved ones, maybe it's time to take the chance. Who knows what it will bring? And I guess it always feels good to know that everyone is actually in this together. Everyone is not alone in this. Yeah, so just do that. I think it's a great thing to do.
All right. Thank you, Flex. Looks like we don't have questions. So everybody, thank you for joining us on this Sunday afternoon chat. And for those of you,
thank you for having me.
you're most welcome. It's a pleasure. And for everyone here, the topic of empathy, right? If there's one thing you need to take away from this entire conversation, in fact, the thing that I learned the most from this conversation is really to ask yourself this question. What's the most generous interpretation of a person? And if you ask yourself that question when you're faced with difficult situations, well, I can promise you it will change the way you react. And if you change the way you react, and if you change the way you manage yourself, you can change the outcome of the relationship and the outcome of the discussion. And I can say, typically, it would have been a lot better than if you did not ask yourself the question. So once again, the key question to ask yourself is this: what is the most generous interpretation of a person? Right. With that, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Flex, for your time. And we will have a discussion again next week. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
All right. See ya.